day, everybody, and welcome. I'm happy to be here and presenting this session. And this session obviously is looking at early intervention, as Zoe was saying earlier on. And I have a decade of experience with Ikamva Youth now. For the last decade, I've been working there as a training manager and looking at career guidance and looking at academic support in the sector, after school sector. And before that, I've been involved decades in youth development on different levels, from socio development to education to training, a whole host of different things. So I come with a wealth of experience in that. And career guidance obviously has been with me now for the past decade, like I was saying, with Ikamva Youth especially. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this practitioner masterclass in career guidance. I've written substantially about it as well. So I will be talking to you about how we can explore early, structured, and grade-specific career guidance, because we need to see how that can transform the learners' futures, especially in the South African context where we have education, unemployment, and inequality as part of the major divides within our society. Okay, so moving on, why does early career guidance matters? Why does it matter? So a powerful idea that I'd like to share is that career guidance is not only about providing answers, it's also about unlocking potential. So early career guidance allows the learners to build self-awareness around their interests, values, and strengths, understand the link between school, post-school, and also going into the world of work. So post-school could be anything in terms of tertiary studies or whatever. So hence the need to start earlier. And also to keep the learners motivated and inspired to move towards their future goals. Because especially the learners that we work with in our socioeconomic areas, we know that they have barriers in terms of realizing dreams and visions and thinking beyond where they are currently at. So we also find that, especially from grade 9 onwards, there's a huge dropout rate. So it's not just about also the future goals, but also the current context where learners are at, and constantly motivating them so that they can be engaging and can be seeking direction in terms of their future. So early career guidance is really very important from the get-go. And just a quick question, just a quick sharing in terms of, just a quick question in terms of career guidance and career support. There's small words that we use interchangeably, with career guidance. But career development is more broad, where we're actually looking at what career guidance is about: the development, it's about the guidance, it's about everything, all holistically linked to building a career for the learner. So career guidance is essentially also about identity development. It's not just about looking at what career you're going to go into, what subject matter you're going to study, but also who am I as a person? How do I develop my identity, and how does my identity also shape my career in going forward? So it's about what the learner wants to do, but also essentially about who they want to become. So those are the important areas that we need to look at to share with learners from a very early age. And even though we're focusing on the grades 9 to 12, we must remember that this process starts as early as grade R, and it even continues throughout adulthood. It's a process of lifelong learning. So grade 9 is especially important also because, and this is where the subject choices happens. Learners start forming their long-term aspirations. They start facing the real world, and where they want to go to. So grade 9 is usually around that. Alternatively, learners just drop out of school in this grade. So we need to shift from looking at merely career choices and where learners want to be as a once-off decision-making process, and rather look at it in terms of that lifelong process of career development. So what is important in terms of looking at the development of learners, we need to also link it to the South African curriculum context, because in career guidance, in the CAP system, we have life orientation, and that life orientation is covering career guidance as well as numerous other things. But with regard to career development, the life orientation becomes an important foundation for grades 7 to 12 especially, where career guidance is very strongly focused. Hence, it is important for us as practitioners to follow what is happening within the career guidance of the life orientation that's framed and embedded within CAPS. Yes, schools don't always follow CAPS, we know that, but at least it gives you, as practitioner, some kind of guideline in terms of where learners are supposed to be and how to pitch the career guidance that you are offering those learners. I will provide some resources where you can go to for this information, but the website is packed. There's the Department of Education's database. There's other websites that you can link up with, so you can also follow where learners should be. So we need to also strengthen the support of learners, not only in terms of classroom practices, but practical experiences that we can provide for those learners, engaging them with activities that is current and relevant to them and their specific grades or where they are at. And we also need to remember collaboration is key. We need to work with the teachers, with the parents, with local organizations to expose these learners to real options, real current and relevant activities. So the key is to align all our interventions with that LO curriculum of CAPS and go beyond the classroom, especially to look at the things that are not generally taught in school and provide them with practical experiences and give them tasks to do that will bridge this gap between school and the world of reality, the world of work. So why grade specific? Grade specific is basically looking at, one size does not fit all. So we need to be looking at what is needed for that specific learner in that specific grade, what themes they are looking at, and aligning it to the learner's various stages of development, and also the key decision-making points in the curriculum. And these are covered in the handout that you will be receiving. I forgot to say to you earlier on that after this presentation, I will provide, other than this presentation that TLT will be providing you with, I will be doing some notes, guidelines that I will also share with you. So there you will see that there's the need for stability. The learner needs stability, especially in our fragmented society. There's a need for resources, how we can share those resources with the learners, be it online or be it physical. Resources is of utmost importance, and we need to develop our organizations with as much resources as possible. There's, for example, Funza Online for literacy and reading. So there's Olico for maths. So there's a lot of other organizations that can provide our organization with support. And the need for understanding the subjects and content knowledge is of utmost importance. So yes, they need that formal training, but our role as practitioners also is not only to focus on the immediate academic, like I was saying earlier on, but also to look at where the learner can be positioned practically. So when we look at the different grades, just to give you a broad outline, in grade 9, in this grade, the theme is discovering and deciding. Discovering where you want to be in life, deciding what you want to do, and what is my lifelong purpose and vision. Where do I see myself in the world of work or post-school studies or whatever it may be. So we need to help the learner to discover what their strengths and their interests are besides merely the academic support. We need to support them in grade 9, especially to support informed subject choice decisions. We need to emphasize the link between the subject that they are going to be taking now in the higher grades versus their future pathways in the future, and unlocking that potential for the learner. And we also need to encourage them, that we are important. We need to motivate them not to drop out of school, and also to persevere amidst the conditions which they have, and also look at what that will, and how that will impact on their life. Grade 10, we're looking at exploring and experiencing the world. We're looking at helping the learners to discover that strengths even more deeply, and also to expose them to uh, further the development of grade 9. And if they have made the wrong choices in grade 9, to say it's not the end of the world, there are other measures that we can put into place. So we can expose the learners to the world of work through job shadowing, having them volunteer somewhere, looking at the basics of CV writing in grade 10, and also providing them with interview skills and career research tools and resources. There's lots of online information that can be received, and also to start them thinking possibly around the NBT, the National Benchmark Test. For those of you who's new to the NBT, it's basically an assessment that is done by South African universities to measure whether students are academically ready for specific courses. So different universities use different measures. So let's look at, for example, do we do maths lit or do we do pure maths, which is specifically needed? So therefore, we need to link up to the universities, because pure maths is not necessarily necessary for all university courses. So we need to be familiar with the universities where our learners would want to go to, if that is where they are heading, what the requirements are of the different tertiary institutions, and prepare them for the journey where they want to go to, remembering that everybody's journey is different. So this is important that we look at learner-specific, learner-based inputs that we need to provide. Grade 11, this is preparing and planning for that future. It helps the learner to research tertiary opportunities, looking at learnerships, what are scarce skills out there, what is needed in the environment, even what skills are there that is not even advertised yet. If you look at AI, for example, it has just arisen out of nowhere, and suddenly it's becoming part of careers in the world of work. So how does AI impact? So we need to think beyond the classroom, like I was saying earlier on. We need to think of future opportunities, some that are not even structured yet. And we need to look at how these learners can apply to the different tertiary institutions, be it university, TVET. How do they go around getting bursaries? Encourage them to look at the start of NSFAS, looking at different opportunities, and also encourage them at the same time to look at soft skills, goal setting, time management, and self-leadership, which is not always strongly advocated within the classroom. So we need to be looking at empowering our learners with that knowledge as well. And we also need to remember that grade 11 is very key if one needs to go into tertiary institutions, because our grade 11 report obviously determines often whether we're going to be getting into a tertiary institution or not. So grade 11 is one of those important areas to look at, looking at the world of life beyond the classroom, looking at budgeting, looking at how I need to develop myself in the world of reality. And then grade 12, for us as NPOs, as organizations working with learners, we often find that we can't reach learners in grade 12 because their big focus here is exams, 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 mock exams, and it's difficult to get formal programs always going unless we work hand in glove with the schools. So I think in terms of where the learners are at in deciding and doing what they want to do, we need to work closely with them, with their parents, and with the schools that they attend. I think especially within the grade 12s to get access to these grade 12 learners. And our big focus is to look at post-school placements, how we can place them. I know when I was at Kamva Youth, the policy there was that they need to find 3 placements post-school, which is a general good rule because you can't just have one option. You need to have more than one option in terms of where you want to go to. So we need to help them transition from school into the world post school, the world of work, the world of tertiary, wherever it is they are going to. And also, we need to reinforce resilience. I think that is very important in grade 12 because it's a really a stressful year. It's really a year of making it or breaking it. Suicide is very high in grade 12. And also, especially, whether they're going to fail or pass or whatever, is always very great. And I think what we often do as after school practitioners, wrongly so, is we're always pushing those big learners who are going to do well, but we don't do sufficient in terms of those who are struggling. So we need to also focus on this whole notion of failure, I think, because there's no such a thing as failure. For example, if a learner is doing really bad, moving into just a mere fail is a great success for that learner. And we need to look at it in terms of that, and we need to encourage learners to do that. So that very briefly looks at the different grades that learners are in. And just before I move forward with the role of practitioners, I just want to stop there a little bit just to see if there's any questions that has emerged in the chat, or if there are any pertinent questions that you have that needs to be answered right now. Okay, I see there's no hands, so I will move swiftly forward in terms of our role
Sorry,
as practitioners.
there is a hand. Someone raised a hand. I think it's Rupi.
Sorry?
Rudy. Someone raised a hand.
Okay, morning
Okay,
everyone.
good morning.
I'm Zubenati from Itembala Bantu. My question is around the subject when the students need to change or choose their subjects when they get to grade 10. So in our center, we have a challenge where the schools themselves are deciding on the subjects that our students need to take because they have like a pass rate standards that they need to keep and maintain. So that is really affecting our students now. If they want to go to the maths and science class, now the school feels like they will fail those subjects. They are much better in the maths lit class. So now that is actually affecting their career path. So how do we best counteract that one?
Yes, that's a very good question. Many schools do that, not just in your area, but in other areas as well. And that is why I was stressing the whole importance of collaboration collaboration, 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 because we need to work hand in glove with schools, with the school governing bodies, with the parents, and make sure that we do the best for the learner. And therefore, this is not just something that you can possibly work on alone, but possibly get to the committee, get to the SGB, get to the school, get to the governing body that is actually working closely with them to let them understand what's happening. Maybe get some professionals on board to do presentations to the school, to understand how important it is, and also possibly working with your management, your school management team that is also the district departments, working with them to work at what is best for the school. I think collaboration, collaboration, collaboration is my response.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It's well understood. Thank you.
Okay, moving along. What is the role of practitioners then? We have covered it earlier on already. I've stressed the role of practical support, providing them with the need to go beyond the classroom. And I think that what we need to do at our organizations is to play that bridging role between school and between the world of work and the practical environment that people are looking at. There are two very good self-assessment tools. The one is Ghost Study and the other one is 16 personality tests. I'm not going to go very much in depth in terms of what it's about. You can play with it if you haven't. You will get the links. The 16 personalities test is a great one to show the personality of learners, what kind of person they are, what kind of interests and things they have that will guide them in terms of their career choices. And the Ghost Study questionnaire is a questionnaire that actually links learners up with potential career opportunities. It doesn't say that you've got to become a doctor, for example. It will say that based on the questionnaire that you've completed, this is the area that you will be looking at possibly in the medical fraternity. And I think that we need to be very careful also when we administer this to the learners, just to say that this is not the answer. This is not necessarily, where you need to go to. There's lots of different opportunities. In the world of work today, in the real world, jobs, careers are like 5 year long. And then people move around all the time. And we know that. But this will at least give some kind of guidance in terms of the direction that will be of interest to that learner. And we need to also look at the possibility of hosting workshops, doing simulations with them, doing job expos, mentorship sessions. There's an annual thing in Cape Town, for example, at the CCI Center, where they have expos, career guidance expos. So we need to familiarize ourselves also with what is happening within the sector, where we can go to, where we can get support. And there's a host of other online websites that you can reach as well. There's
Where's this phone number?
Career Planet, there's NYDA, there's your local businesses. There's a whole host of people that we can tap into. So like even the guest speakers, we can look at ex-learners, alumni, getting them involved in supporting the learners. And remember again, like I said earlier on, we're not just preparing the learners for a career or a job. We're also nurturing their agency and hope, inspiring them and motivating them to become successful in their lives. And what actually works in practice is that we need to remember that we need to start early. We need to be learner-centered, like I said earlier on. We need to use our African tradition of storytelling, inviting shared stories, success stories, getting people to talk about different options realistically and hopefully. If somebody wants to be a doctor, for example, and they're not doing pure maths, we need to be realistic and say, look, you won't be able to do medicine because you are not in pure maths. And we need to be open and honest about it and share things practically that is realistic. We cannot build dreams on something that is unrealistic. So, also in terms of tracking and celebrating the progress, minor steps need to move forward. So, like I was saying earlier on, if a learner has been at the lower grades all the time, failing their subjects, and they actually improved by 20% in their failure, acknowledge the 20% of success and then reflect on that, celebrate that, and say, yes, you can do it, and move forward, giving them that kind of feedback and planning in terms of how they can resolve it. So, those are some good steps to take in terms of useful practices in the sector. And here's a whole host of resources that's available as well. You will get all these links. So there's the DBE, like I was mentioning earlier on, the Department of Basic Education. All the CAPs are outlined there. They provide you with summarized guidelines. There's the career websites I tossed out earlier on, NCAP, Career Planet, NYDA, and then also for bursaries, there's NSFAS. And then the tools that I spoke about earlier on, the 16 personalities and Go Study. There are a host of these online questionnaires as well, but I think these two specifically looks at early career guidance and helps the learners to connect not only in terms of where they're going, but also looking at the connection that I mentioned earlier on about identity and opportunity. So the grade specific areas are important, age appropriate themes that they need to be working on, and as guidelines in terms of where they are going. So therefore, we need to keep it CAPS aligned. And I stress again, all schools don't follow CAPS necessarily as set out, but at least it helps us in terms of where they are at. And then also, like I've been encouraging, collaboration. And at the end of this, obviously, like I was saying, you will get a resource pack of where you can go to for additional information. So hopefully this resources will help you in the future. And also, before I close out, I also want to share these two important things which I found very useful. And these are the concepts of the growth mindset and ikigai. The whole thing of growth mindsets is, how do we move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? Working with learners in the areas that we work with, in areas where people are struggling, people become despondent, people get a fixed mindset, they don't want to think further than beyond. So therefore, that growth mindset is there as a belief in one's abilities and the intelligence that we have as people through the efforts that we can have put in, and also the learning that we put in, the process of learning that happens, and our constant persistence of making change possible. And this is also further important because it encourages, like I said earlier on, resilience, adaptability, and that spirit of lifelong learning, creating the love for lifelong learning, wanting to do their own research even, which is beyond the school. I emphasize again, beyond the school, but also focusing on later world of work, of life, of post-school studies, or wherever it is. And then this one of ikigai. The meaning of ikigai simply means the reason for being. It basically intersects with what you love doing, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And together, putting this together into that passion and purpose, the drive to go to where you want to be in life. But it is an ongoing journey that needs to be meaningful and fulfilling as we go along and take the steps to our future. The growth mindsets and ikigai, there's two videos on each that I will be sharing with you. I'll be sharing the links with you. If you don't understand ikigai, You can go through them. It will give you a very good explanation in terms of growth mindset and ikigai. So yes, ladies, gentlemen, others, with the pronouns, one needs to be very careful these days. Whoever's in the room, thank you very much. Just as a last point to ponder, I give you some questions to think about on your own, to reflect on before we move to questions and answers. So look at these three questions. What are the common career guidance gaps that I have seen in my experience? How might I adapt these themes to the context that we have just experienced now that we have gone through? And the third question, what could be small next steps after the session? So I just like us to pause for a few minutes of self-reflection and thought, self-thought, and just make notes for yourself. Pop in some thoughts into the chat, whatever it is that you need answered in terms of this presentation. Also, any questions that you have or any contributions that you would like to add, just pause a moment and just jot these down so that you can reflect on them. I give you a few minutes of pause before we go into question and answers. Okay, so I thank you very much. I'm not going to ask you to answer those questions necessarily. I just like to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions, concerns, contributions that they would like to share. So I'll first give people in the house a chance, and then I'm not sure, I haven't been following the chat, Zoe will provide us with the contributions that were there possibly in the chat.
Sure, thanks, Pippi. And there's Zandy also who has her hand raised. We go to Zandy first.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the very informative presentation. Just to go back to the question earlier raised, we run a STEM club where most of the kids, which are, like, for example, one of the high schools we support through Career Expose, they are a whole grade 10 class. They go up to, I think, KL, yeah, only 32 people are doing maths and 50. That's out of 288 kids, less than 50 doing science. That challenge is there, and collaboration hasn't been very welcoming in us getting to schools and supporting kids to understand the importance not to drive kids to maths and science, because there's different pathways, entrepreneurship and other things. But it is true that kids are forced to take subjects based on what the teachers are there, they teach it. And this is a systematic problem across the country. And I know us as after-school practitioners cannot defeat the system, but many kids are actually being left behind and dropping out just because of this. Very desponding. Then move to grade 12s. Our grade 11s, which are now grade 12, were thriving last year in the club. They now attend SIP classes 7 days a week, including Sunday. they mentally, physically exhausted. So I don't know what caliber of um, future worker, future academic we want to produce. They're forcing kids to go to school 7 days a week. They can't even follow career paths because it's just cramming. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure if that was a question or just a contribution, but just in terms of the collaboration area, I'd just like to stress it again. But also in terms of our vision as organizations in the after-school sector, I think we need to also be very wary in terms of what's happening. We need to scan the environments that we are working in. And if this is really a pressing need, and there's a lot of learners, for example, that wants to do maths and science and they're dropping out of school, maybe our role as organizations are to go into teaching these different topics and getting professionals to come in and teach them the maths and science that they want instead of them dropping out. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we need to look at our environments that we are in and how we can support that specific environments. Not going into competition with schools necessarily, don't get me wrong, but we need to look at how we can possibly do that. What collaboration
No,
is possible?
thanks. I'd just like to hear from others that face the similar. I mean, like the district in our area has said nobody coming to our schools with disrupting learning. So hence the after school. And then some kids find when they question something they learned in a different methodology at after school, the teacher then victimizes. So I'd like to hear from the floor how, because we're still new to this, how they deal with such things. Thanks.
So Zandi's asking all practitioners if they have some kind of offering in terms of their best practice that they do. Is there anybody that can share?
I think I can try and assist. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
We can hear
sir.
you, Mazizi.
This is Mazizi from Beautiful Gate, SA. So the best approach or the approach that currently we work in is through collaborative work. So from the past years, what I've actually noticed was that there seemed to be a slight drop in terms of mathematics in between grade 10 and 11. Then what we focused on was the learners coming in from grade 8 and grade 9, which also speaks to the point that you alluded to, Pepe, in terms of the grade 9 learner is most likely to drop out or something like that. So we kind of like had meetings, approached the neighboring schools as to how we can actually work together and try and assist in this manner. But in some schools, this calling is it's a tricky because they're very stagnant towards change, and some of the schools actually see the kind of model that we are trying to bring, because it's very important through that collaboration that we actually make it clear that we are not there to substitute them as teachers, but we are just there to try and assist those teachers. Because now you'd find that if a learner now does great, because it's one of the patterns that we've picked up, is that most of the learners that we actually support in, maybe they strive well in mathematics, now the school just picks those highly performing learners and they get to join programs like Kutlwanong and stuff like that. you know, and leaving the ones that are actually underperforming. So I think having intentional collaboration with the teachers as well as the SMT actually really helps, and also not leaving the parents behind. For us, it has quite worked so far. So I think that could be a starting point. Thanks.
Thanks, Azizi. Just a quick question to you, follow up. So you work with lower grades as well to strengthen their maths and science. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I just needed to emphasize that. Okay, so my time is up. My hour is over, so I hand it back to you for questions and comments to lead the process so that I don't run over time, because you know I'll go on all the time.
Yes,
There's
well
some
done.
comments in the chat as well, and I think there's a very important one from Janine, the last one. So I think there's a couple of things in the chat that you might want to address.
Good morning, everybody. I will share my slide. I
Oh
think
yeah, Peppy, if you can
Peppy,
just stop sharing yours.
I'm Ronald Plaatjes. I'm from the Nelson Mandela University this morning as I join all of you in conversation. And thank you that we can elaborate and collaborate and share some ideas. Just want to do the presentation mode. There we go. Hope you can hear me. So I'm Ronald Plaatjes from the Nelson Mandela University, and I think I position myself in this conversation looking from the university into schools. So, and that is where I position myself. I am a student academic developer. I represent student success at Nelson Mandela University, and we look at how can we support students in the way they want to be successful at university. I've also, over the years, in 2007 to 2009, were involved in this book that we call How to Make Higher Education Easier. So that's my involvement, and that is where I position myself currently. So let's get started. So I thought, maybe where you are, quiet, stretch yourself. A next hour going. Can you see any words? Just shout it to yourself. Let's get started. I hope you saw a word or two. I hope you've shouted it out to yourself. And I hope you are ready as we move on in the way you have a pen or paper, your notebook with you, and we doodle. I will use the Socratic methodology, thinking about our thinking. It is very complex, very chaotic, yet necessary to speak about. I think when all students enter the university, they have the picture what we have above, the plan. During their first academic week, actually, they find out that the life at university is very different. And it is that point that can change how they position themselves psychologically and also in their academic identity. Already in 1997, the Sunday Times already wrote an article around the huge gap between high school and university. And so the emphasis on the whole idea, understanding transition and understanding adjustment is very important. It's more complex where higher education is currently. We went through a fees must fall and we went through a COVID. So these complexities are real. In positioning ourselves, I think it's important to look at our philosophy. And within the curriculum, it's always to understand who is my student? The thou is the center of the curriculum. And so in doing that, we position ourselves possibly in an idea of the human being as the center of education. And I think this is very important in the way we want to drive policy into practice, in the way we want to drive whatever is in a document written, in our outline, our framework. How do we keep the student, the one we are supporting, the center of it all? I wonder in the house, if I would ask you this morning, going into this afternoon, how do you define student success? What's the first 3 words that comes to mind when you think of student success? And if you think of those 3 words that comes to mind, how would you put that in a possible paragraph for yourself? I think it's important that we understand that as you are involved in different areas in the way we build a village around our learners and a village around our students, that we understand the student success agenda. And so I'm wondering, where are you with your definition? Where are you with your first 3 words? How do you see student success? I think it's important because it will help us frame possibly the way we, the way we think of student success. With the Fees Must Fall movement, the Nelson Mandela University really had deep conversations with all stakeholders in the way we needed to make sense of the student voice. And so we came up with this idea that you see in front of you, yet with post-COVID, it's something that we need to revisit. So before you, it's the idea of strengths and weaknesses. It's the idea of personal goals, persistence, commitment, taking co-responsibility. How do we bring the support structures into academics, and how do we support the student to graduate as a holistic being? We also, when we think of student success, we think of enablers. And so based on the work of 2017 after Fees Must Fall movement, one of the things that came out is the preparedness of transition to higher education. Pre-uni becomes a very important idea. The bridge between school and university, there's a big gap for the student. If you take our School of Engineering students, for instance, within the first 3 to 4 weeks, they have to write their first maths test, their first physics test. Transition is vital, and therefore how we even look at what happens before that academic week when the student starts, what happened in orientation, and what happened when the student or the learner decide to go to a university, that whole idea of pre-uni. With that, curriculum transformation is important. It is important that we look at how we and what philosophy we are using when we think of curriculum design, and how do we keep a student-centered approach. With that, assessment and student feedback, and that is where policy needs to direct practice. In the way we give intentional feedback to students, in the way we want to create self-directed learning and self-regulation when it comes to our learners and our students. After the COVID, our campus life and facilities, we needed to rebirth actually a sense of belonging on campuses. And this is very much a contributor to the idea of student success, my idea of belonging, my idea how I will fit into. I come maybe from a population or home at a school that were 800 learners, and now I'm part of a school that has 30,000 learners. Student academic support is vital in the way it comes along the idea of the curriculum, the idea of module support, and the idea of how we can support the student towards first year, towards graduation. Motivation, I think we also spoke and touched on that in Pepe's presentation, a big factor. And having a positive attitude, a big factor. And I cannot stress this enough. One of the formulas we use is, if you think of student performance percentage equal IQ multiplied by motivation. The why I'm doing and why I'm doing it becomes very important in the way the student positioned himself or herself in the academia space. I think Tinto, a guru in student success, helps us in the complexity of student success. How do we take control? And the classroom is a very important place in the way we can support, because the teacher is a very important indicator, support structure in how we can see how the student will feel motivated and how we can have a dent on student success. So Tinto says students will get more involved in learning, spend more time learning, and in turn learn more when they are placed in supportive educational settings that hold high expectations for their success, provide frequent feedback about their learning, and share their learning with others. And so I think those are 4 very important ideas in the way we in the classroom take control in the philosophy we adopt. Tinto goes further by saying there are 3 key student outcomes that always must be promoted. Student retention, which speaks to persistence. How long can we keep a student in the system? Student learning, how is the student learning? And personal development, the holistic idea of the person, and how do we support that person holistically. At the bottom, you see some ideas from the student success guru in the way it is complex, in the way that there is no one answer to student success. So it's defined as a holistic phenomenon that embraces the multiple dimensions of personal development and the multiple goals of higher education. And with that brings the alignment of the learner that moves into a student identity from a subject idea into a module idea, from a school idea into a university idea. And that identity and sense of seeking belonging becomes very important. And so creating a culture of care, because higher education are big institutions, becomes very important what philosophy we adopt in the way we are intentional, in the way we are authentic, in the way we want to create a culture of care. And here I draw from Matai's work, I draw from Mbiti's work around a relational centered approach in the way we think of student success and student support. And that brings us to this idea of collective ownership. How do we build a village from each angle and collectively take responsibility in how we want to create success for our learners and our students? And so when we draw from a culture of care, we do think of an African value like Ubuntu that speaks towards, I see you, you matters. And so how do we take a kind of philosophy like that? How do we infuse it in support structures? Knowing well, the moment we speak about Ubuntu, we bring social justice to the table. And if we look at social justice and we bring social justice to the table, advocacy becomes real. I need to move beyond just the KPIs, because a hungry student, for instance, with us becomes real. It's not just about how the student is learning, but I need to take into account, where is the student sleeping? Is the student eating? And so it requires a whole village to get together in the way we make sense of student support and student success. I like this idea, what Brené Brown says, the very act of listening to someone else's story is one of generosity and learning. It is a sign that you showed up. And I think for me, systems, how do we infuse and influence systems to adopt a more humanized pedagogy idea in the way we build student support, student success, and in the way we make the student feel it is possible? I think many students, when they join university after the first week, and through mentoring students and through working with mentors, students start to feel, they question their ability. They even go so far and question their intellect. And that has a whole rumble effect on how the students see themselves and how it affects the confidence level of the student. Yeah, I'm talking about a student now that has the APS marks for doing, for instance, engineering, for doing pharmacy, for doing BCom chartered accounting, for doing mechatronics. And we do find the gaps even our strong students experience when they come to university. And so I draw from Nguza Saba's 7 principles that actually invites us to this idea of how do we adopt collective work and responsibility into our philosophy, into our systems, in the way we make it relational. So it calls for that we are voices of change, individually strong, yet powerfully, collectively powerfully strong. We do know COVID hit us hard. It hit higher education hard as a sector. The purpose of higher education, that comes into question. And so it is important that when we look at student success, looking from university into the schools, that we look at how can we support a student better, because it requires now a different idea, because as the last bullet says, it is crucial that we investigate approaches that will enable us to understand the new needs of our students. That means we now need new knowledge. We cannot draw from knowledge pre-COVID. And how do we position ourselves from a research point of view and from a praxis point of view in how we become effective? The transformation report of 2023, the Higher Education Transformation Report, showcase nothing actually has changed within higher education. It showcased there's still a high dropout rate. It still showcases language policies not being embedded into the classroom and practices. It showcases ineffective teaching practices. It showcases that our institutions, our campus culture don't contribute to the student experience. And therefore, it is important that we listen to the student voice. It is important that we draw from the student voice and that we make sense of it. And so, this is from a student's voice, Shlumelo Sonyani. He is a first-generation student. He comes from a school positioned in Quintile 1, 2, and 3, our no-fee schools. He actually used his background and his experience as a first-year student and putting this into a conference paper. And so this highlights what he draws from his own experiences and how the gap in the system cannot meet his gaps. He's a first-generation student, no exposure to prior knowledge, study equipment, poor language skills, poor quality of basic education for him as a student, his voice, computer illiteracies, home environment, economic issues, no funding, because many of our students don't know they can apply for NSFAS. And sometimes if they apply for NSFAS, then there's the difference between a TVET college and a university NSFAS. And so all of the above influence the first year experience for our first years. No study materials, resources, drug and alcohol abuse, and unconducive environment for learning. So when we think of student success, we need to think of the power of collaboration. We need to think differently. We need to break down silos. We need to create seamless learning experiences. We need to infuse ideologies. We need to learn from each other. And so the question, the challenge would be, what can we do more? How can we get better? How can we become more intentional? How can we really build a village around a learner in his becoming to a student, and when the learner positions himself or herself at university, how do we build that further? And so the support that we build, if we think of student success, it needs to be invitational. It needs to be intentional. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to be interconnected. There's too much in the system that there's best practice idea, but the system is not speaking to each other. And so how do we take student success, conceptualize it, embed it in a life cycle approach? For instance, in a student life cycle approach. How do we adopt a holistic understanding of student success and development? And how do we use formal learning and co-curricular learning outside of the class and let it speak to the development of student academically, personally, socially, and responsibly? So dimensions of engagement is important. I thought, let me just put this here in, because this is important when we think of student success, that you engage through your behavior. What's your story, Ronel? I am here. I filled in the attendance list. Move on. You engage emotionally and you engage cognitively. And what we found when we think of student success for our students get blocked cognitively because of emotional engagement. that they either they participate, yet they have become compliant, or they are dissociated from the activities. Meaning our students can be in class, but does not mean they are present because of triggers around belonging, but around intellectual identity and around this big idea, can I do this? So change and transition is important. And it's important that we look at different places of transition. There's a transition, as we are highlighting today, from school to first year. And as Pepe indicated, through career, from that grade 9 idea, grade 10, 11, 12, how we build on that systematically, intentionally, how we then bridge that and create a good bridge into a first year experience. We have also that transition for students from first year to second year. Many students find second year more difficult. In first year, they might be more blanketed approach, but from second year, they have to really now do it on their own. And then that transition from second year to third year. We also see it very important with our fourth year degrees. Mechatronics is a four-year degree. Pharmacy is a 4-year degree. BCom Chartered Accounting is a 4-year degree. Big transition in third year, in getting ready for that last year, final year. And how the student understands this change and transition is important. So the process of transition, drawing from John Fisher's work, is real. That a student can come in intellectually feeling good about their intelligence and that they can do this, yet they might experience already around the student life cycle that they can go into places of fear, denial, and they can maybe sit for a while there. This is where we find that our students isolate themselves totally from the academic idea and the academic routines of a student. What you see in front of you is a footprint built from or taken from the student life cycle of our first years, the School of Engineering. So what we need to note from a student life cycle, that there's a footprint, there's a cycle. What we don't want a student to do is to get too low in the cycle. Because if a student gets too low in the cycle, it's no more just an academic issue. It's a psychological issue. And this is where student counseling, a psychologist needs to step in the way we seek support for our students. What you need to note for me here, this is usually we start 9 February, usually our beginning of an academic year. This is already in February 3rd and 4th week. We run university with a term 1, a 7-week cycle. Then we have a week break, and then we have term 2 or block 2, another 7-week cycle that we run till the end of May. Then we start with exams, usually the 4th of June, when we run then till the 24th of June. So what you see in front of you is the student already going into the dip in the 3rd and the 4th week of the first term academic week. So it is important what we do concerning interventions before the 3rd and 4th week. We need to adopt from a student success idea a reactive model, and we need to adopt a proactive model in the way we want to support a student, that when the student comes into its student life cycle, the student does not go too low. As an institution, we can help the student find their voice. If a student goes too long, as I say, it's hard to find the student into the academic setup. So what we also draw from this group of students, this was 396 students, we draw from them that they do find their voice back. What we want to take note here, because we're looking specifically from school into university, that all the hard work we have been doing before, because we don't have maybe effective pre-uni, effective bridges of preparing a student for university, the student can already lose their academic identity in the third, fourth week. I said this is the School of Engineering. They write their first test in the third and fourth week, and it works usually like this. When you write your maths test, you will write your physics test. And so if the student goes into a dip and the student needs now to start preparing for their first test, and usually for maths, we only have 3 tests. For physics, we also only have 3 tests for the whole of the semester, for the whole of the 14 weeks. Out of that, we create a DP, which allows the student to write an exam. If the DP is lower than 40%, the student cannot enter the exam office. Meaning the student might now extend their first year, because for the School of Engineering, for instance, physics and maths will be prerequisites for the second semester. So yeah, I just want to draw our attention to the importance of what happens before that third, fourth week. How do we adopt a predictive model, a more proactive model, a more intentionality of supporting students? Now, this group of students that you see in front of you is a group of students that went through orientation. It's a group of students that had mentors and even an advisor. It's a group of students also that we've provided for that specific year tutors. The student life cycle footprint is real for a student. With all of that support, transition and adjustment becomes very real for a first year student. What I have now in front of me is, at the beginning of the year, we have a project that we run for quintile 1, 2, and 3, our no-fee schools. And through this, we've created mentors where a student can grab a mentor. So at the beginning of the year, we ask our quintile 1, 2, and 3. This is our majority of students at the Nelson Mandela University, based on the transformation agenda of higher education and based on access to success and adopting a massification agenda. And so 86% of our students are, as we say from an HR perspective, Black students, African students, and they come from quintile 1, 2, and 3. We also, from an NMU perspective, if you look at this voice that's sitting in front of you, that's saying something to us, comes from the Eastern Cape. What I want you to draw, this is at the beginning, entering the academic year. Already time management is a struggle. Adjusting to university is a struggle. Basic computer skills. I cannot emphasize this enough. all students based on the 1994-1997 inclusivity within higher education. We incorporated that module of English, or BCom students do English, or it's incorporated in the degrees, plus a basic computer skill set module. And already at the beginning of the year, our students are struggling, not understanding the work content, inability to access resources like the use of the library. Please note, it's at the beginning of the year. Stress and anxiety is still low for our first year student. Dealing with peer pressure a little bit lower here, can't make friends lower here, but already we can see the classroom issues has already showcased in the way the student is asking for support. What you see now in front of you is voices from a group of students, 917 first-year students. We draw them from different faculties, all faculties. When we ask them at the beginning of the specific year, what do they need? Where do they need support in? And so this is a student answering this. They've started the year. It's now February month going into March, and we did the survey with them. And as you can see, time management, high, procrastination, a study plan, academic content, schedule, finances, and other. What I showcase here for you when we ask what other type of support do you need, this is also 2025 at the beginning of the year, same population student, drawing from the 917 students. Here we see again that basic computer skills staying high. Here we see again need support with computer modules here, and here we see need assistance with module. After what we pick up when we bring mentoring in, try to bring it in from day one after orientation. Our orientation also have how-to buddies that support students. And as we take them into their faculty discipline and as they can grab a mentor, we see here they already asking for assistance with module support and how tutoring becomes a very important idea. Now, what we need to draw here is the student did the rigor of entering the university. The student here has possibly a 6 for physics and maths. And we draw from this is that the student can struggle. All students need support. And it is important that we understand the whole idea of transition and adjustment. So adjustment is very important. Adjustment, and I draw from the work here of this article, Adjustment to University and Academic Performance Among Disadvantaged Students. Adjustment to the university environment is regarded as an important factor in predicting university outcome. And so the importance of adjustment and how we support that student so that they can cope with the demands of university. Here we see, drawing from this work of a first-year university students' academic success and the importance of academic support, the idea of academic performance and retention and graduation, and also self-regulated or self-directed, and how that has an important link to retention and student success. So self-regulation or self-directed learning is a predictor for academic achievement. I think this is important when we think of what's the gaps in what we already have. How do we bring it into an umbrella that speaks of self-regulation and self-directed learning? because research shows that it is a predictor of academic achievement. And what we see is self-regulated drawing from this article, what makes a good student, we see that it's the constant, how do we help a student to constantly plan, constantly organize, constantly monitor and evaluate their processes. Also drawing from that same article, the importance of emotions. And here we speak of achievement emotions that we can distinguish according to this article into activity emotions and into outcome emotions, and how that helps with motivation, enables or blocks motivation. Motivation is important. If we want to see how why a student is not goal directed, we need to look at the motivation of the student, the fuel, the petrol, what's happening at the back end. And so it's good to have goals. Even James Clear in his book makes it clear. Goals will not take us where we need to go. It's the systems. And so students need to become self-directed in their systems while they possibly wait for bigger systems to get their act in order. So Robbins et al. Model says the following. It's a predictive pathway. If we want to see a student perform academically well, we must ask the question, is the student adjusting well? Now, a student that was an achiever at school, coming to university, always helping other students, find it very difficult to call in their village. It's a gap. We need to teach even our high achievers to how to ask for help, because the predictive pathway towards academic performance, a Robbins et al. Model says, we have to ask ourselves, did the student seek help? How is the student seeking help? Where is the student with their motivation? How check in with the student concerning their self-esteem? How is the student's stress levels and stress management? And how is the student carry their academic overload? Now, already we have seen, I've shown you, the student just came in the academic year, second week in February. The student is already struggling with workload based on the pace that we work against. And the way the student cannot wait for the teacher or the lecturer, in the way the student need to pace themselves. And so how do we create a framework in how we push the learner in his or her becoming as a student concerning post-school university link into a more self-directed idea and self-regulated idea? So attitude is key. How the student reflect is key. How the student is proactive. Knowledge is power. Draw from your village. Draw from the different stakeholders. Go to your lecturer. Consult. Have SMART goals. Assess academic resources. Stay connected to people. That is so important because students really go into isolation. Assess your support networks, ask for help when needed, focus on what you can control. What I showcase to you now is literature is clear. If a quintile 1, 2, and 3 student from a no-fees background school are supported from day 1, it can actually override a quintile 5 and private student. The emphasis lies in the support from day 1. And then what we want to bring across for us as conversation seekers, change makers, the idea of the what happens before the student even enters into into university or into the academic setup. So systems are important. I'm drawing from Donella Meadows' article here, Thinking in Systems. The interconnectivity of systems is important. Systems need to speak to each other in function, in elements, and in interconnection. Systems must be created intentionally. If it is not created intentionally, we will see that a student will not succeed. And so that is important. And a system, macro, micro, inside the classroom, outside the classroom, policy, practice, all of these systems needs to speak to each other. Drawing from Fink's work, Lee Fink, taxonomy, where we look at significant learning. What do we do if we want to create significant learning in the way we think through student success? It's how we use foundational knowledge, how we teach the learner, the student, to apply beyond just what they learn. How do they integrate according to the Bloom taxonomy, low order thinking, high order thinking, problem solving skills, critical thinking, a change, how do they handle change, the human dimension of change and in transition and adjustment. How do we care for students within that transition and adjustment? And how do we equip them and empower them in learning how to learn? And so it's important in any idea of change, drawing from David Peter Stroh's work, systems thinking for social change. The idea would be the readiness for change. So students come in and the popo hits the fan, and they are not ready for change. And they cling on to the very strategy that has helped them and supported them, that brought them into this success idea of entering higher education. Yet they cannot read and be proactive that change is necessary. And what do? They run to self. They blame self, they shame self, and they make themselves the problem in a very bigger, complex and systematic idea of success. And so readiness to change is important. Always asking ourselves, where are we? Where do we want to go? And how do we formulate the bridge between that? And then also love the work of John Fisher in this idea of how do we build effective intentional systems? How do we move out of the frustration of it? How do we create an idea of letting go? Now, many students stay very long in this idea of letting go before they experiment new models. And so therefore, because they sometimes is now in isolation, this idea of understanding self, self-awareness, their own emotional intelligence, who they are becomes very important in the way they can get faster out of the letting go, in the way they can adopt new models. And so this is my second last slide. We need to understand there are times when we need to work from remedial because the system is sometimes built on a dominant voice, but yet we want to push it to developmental. So the realities of the system is clear. And how do we help the system that it can become more developmental in the way we build interventions that speaks to the student voice, and in the way we use senior students also in the village to help a second-year student helping a first-year student, a first-year student helping a matric student. And how do we build those different ideas in the village in how we support each other? my concluding remarks as follows. And I conclude and I take it from Donella Meadows' thinking, the Big Five rule. The future can't be predicted, but it can be envisioned and brought lovingly into being. Systems can't be controlled, but they can be designed and redesigned because it's people. We can't impose our will upon a system. We can listen to what the system tells us, discover how its properties and our values can work together to bring forth something much better than could ever be produced by our will alone. Living successfully in a world of systems requires more of us than our ability to calculate. It requires our full humanity, our rationality, our ability to sort out truth from falsehood, our intuition, our compassion, our vision, and our morality. So we can dance in the complexity of student success. Thank you for this time where I could share my few treasures.